Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, Episode 90.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of The Stars Align, Drop It, and Trellis, which we're putting on tap as well. Jake and fellow Punchboard Media member Eric Buscemi discuss their recent experiences at PAX Unplugged. I talk about bottle dating, and Jake asked our Slack channel to make a graph. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. Know that all is for the best in the best of our
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
Maybe with a few months off between events. Just
perhaps.
Maybe. Yes, we are coming in at the middle of December. The convention season of board games is finally over. We can breathe for a minute.
Are you saying that you're only going to drink one beer every few months?
No, but there's no big beer events coming up in the near... We have to go to a burial thing on Saturday, don't we?
We do.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Draft Mechanic. If you are a first-time listener, thank you so much for joining us. If you are returning, we love you so much as well. You can find us on the internet at draftmechanic.net, on social media at Draft Mechanic, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the usual places.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. There will be a thread up for this episode, as there is for every episode. So if we say something and you're like, hey, I got to tell them something about that, that is the place to do it.
Yes, and I do want to throw a shout out to our new Board Game Geek micro badge holders. We have Sehui Long, the designer of Passeraya, picked one up, and also Josh Perry since our last episode.
I'm sorry, they're called what now?
Micro badges?
Micro badgers.
Micro badge. Yes, we have new micro badgers. Yes. I thought that I wasn't allowed to do the micro badger thing.
But it's so funny to envision tiny little badgers.
Tiny 16 by 16 pixel badgers. No, we are not creating another mascot. We already have a live studio cat, which is available on a t-shirt if you want to get that particular shirt.
We're also not Wisconsin fans, so...
Oh, we are getting off the rails. Let's get back at it. So, what else do we have going on around the world?
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we have our next game night on December 18th at Salud Cerveceria. That is on the third Tuesday of every month. We also have one on the first Thursday of every month at Good Road Cider Works. That was this past Thursday. We had a great time, and I expect we will do the same at Salud on the third Tuesday of December, as we always do. So if you're in the area, we'd love for you to come out, play some games, drink some beers, or some coffee or tea. They also have that. They just started their new menu, which is absolutely delicious.
Those pizza.
So come eat some food, drink some beverages, play some games, have a good time.
It's our last meetup of the year, so we hope to see you there at Salud. Yes, the place. Salud, the place. Upstairs. We'll be upstairs in the Salud Cerveceria.
Yes.
Like I said earlier, Danielle, finally, convention season is over. It is extended a little bit longer this year because we had PAX Unplugged, and if you listened to our last episode or were at PAX, you might have seen me or known that I was at PAX Unplugged demoing for City of Gears for Grey Fox Games.
You were?
Yes.
That's why it was so quiet around here.
The cat didn't talk at all for a weekend.
He did. You just weren't here to hear it.
So we have Eric Buscemi, fellow Punchboard Media member, on later, and we talk about our experiences at PAX Unplugged because he was also there. So we got a chance to kind of just riff about the experience. He went last year, so he talks about how it's changed since the first time. But I do want to, at the very top of the show, just give a quick shout out to all the people that I met at PAX Unplugged, both people that had never heard of Draft Mechanic and a few people that had heard about Draft Mechanic already. It was super cool to see people like, oh, I've heard of that podcast on your t-shirt. I'm like, hi, I'm Jake. And it was a lot of fun demoing. This is the first time I've ever really demoed for a convention for, a particular game, and playing City of Gears for really 12 hours over 3 days. I learned a lot about how to effectively teach games, and I hope that that is useful for us going forward as we are obviously playing tons of new games and moving into 2019. And hopefully I can teach everything a little bit better and not forget rules.
Unsurprisingly, we will have a 6-pack review of City of Gears coming up in, I believe, the next episode. Once I get a couple of plays in to be anywhere near the familiarity with that game that you have currently.
Yeah, I have played 15 games of City of Gears now in various forms of half to full games.
I've played one, so we need to change that discrepancy a little bit.
But PAX Unplugged was super cool, and if you were thinking about going, I think it's awesome, but you'll obviously hear more about that later with Eric. But I think it is time to move on to the part of the show where we talk about games of the future.
Sure.
Danielle, would you like to start us off with updates from last episode's Kickstarter stuff?
Okay, last episode we talked about Aeon's End digital implementation from Handelabra Games. This finished at $37,000 of its $30,000 goal with 1,936 backers. Some stretch goals were unlocked, including additional mages and promo packs. They also announced that they will develop it for tablets as well, and it's for release in 1 month after the Steam launch.
Yeah, I actually stopped by the Handelabra booth at PAX Unplugged as the campaign was going, and they were super excited to talk about the fact that they are releasing this on tablets because it was super requested, and I believe they've done that in previous releases that they've done and moved stuff over to that as well, but they want to stay true to the people that are backing the game on Steam, so they will be delaying it a month after launch. And apparently, if you backed it and you really needed to get it on a tablet instead, they have an option for you to do that there too.
Well, I mean, that's really good considering if you look at the recent implementation of Terraforming Mars, a lot of people were complaining that it wasn't a tablet release as well.
Yeah.
Which, frankly, I wouldn't necessarily want to play it on a tablet, but that might be because we have a smaller scale tablet, so everything would be really crunched. I guess if you had one of the larger tablets, it would be easier to play, but I know a lot of people wished that that had come out on tablet instead of just on Steam, so Handelabra is probably helping themselves out with this.
Very true.
Next up, Rallyman GT from Holy Grail Games finished at $188,000 of its $23,000 goal. It had 2,565 backers and earned 34 stretch goals. A lot of those were just like additional road, additional road tiles, but they're packing a lot of content in there. I do kind of wonder if they had 34 stretch goals, how many of those were actually meant to be in the game and they just took them out to make them stretch goals, which is kind of annoying, but either way you get it now because it met those goals.
Yeah, I had a similar thought as I was looking over the page, and I was scrolling down the list, and it's just like one new road tile, and it's like this one curves 90 degrees, this one curves 60 degrees. I'm like, okay, guys, those are just new roads. But everybody did get the bridge, which is cool, and it looks like there's like 5 different expansion boxes with different cars and stuff. So if you backed Rallyman, maybe you went all in and got a whole ton of stuff. It definitely looks like there was a lot of stuff to get for this game.
Finally, Metal
from
Lay Waste Games and Jordan Draper Games is funding at $23,000 of its $20,000 goal with 686 backers. This ends on Thursday, December 13th, so you've still got time to get in there and back this if you are interested in it. It's still entirely made out of metal as well, which, I mean, that's sort of the point. I can't imagine that would have changed.
Yeah, Jordan Draper had a booth at PAX Unplugged. I didn't see a copy of Metal there. I kind of figured that they would have like a demo copy, but I feel like anybody who wanted to back this game backed it in that first few months because it hasn't really had any growth since we talked about it 2 weeks ago.
They probably didn't want people like throwing things in their con booth, especially metal things.
Mm-hmm. Well, you still got a few days if you want a box of metal components. You can do it.
True.
All right, so new stuff. This is, well, I guess kind of new stuff. This is a game we've actually talked about in a Kickstarter segment before, and we've talked about it in our Rando Writers episode 82 as well. It is Roll to the Top Laminate. This is coming from Quali Games, funding currently at $14,000 of its $8,000 goal with 555 backers. This ends on Wednesday, December 19th. You can get it, hopefully, estimated delivery of March 2019. Pledge levels are $25 for the laminate version plus the special sheets, and then $17 if you had the first edition and you want to upgrade to laminated sheets of all that stuff plus the new Roll to the Top and Bottom one. So this is a Rando Writer we talked about, obviously, back in 82. You roll some dice and you're filling out a sheet of boxes and you want to stack numbers up from the lowest all the way up to the top where you have the highest numbers. You can only place numbers on top of other numbers if it's bigger than both of the numbers that support it below. And kind of the fun, gamey element of this is that depending on a sixth die you roll, a special die, you're either adding or removing one of the dice from your dice pool. And it's a dice chain of D4 up to D20, basically, that you're manipulating in and out. So if you're playing it multiplayer, you're kind of looking at everybody else's stuff and being like, oh, they really need a low number, I'm going to take the D4 out. That kind of mechanic like that. This one adds in a map of Kenya for the Roll to the Top and Bottom one, where the equator line is the start of that particular sheet. So you have to start with a middle number, which is kind of interesting, and then work your way below, obviously, and then above to finish out the whole sheet. It's a minor little difference, but it's, something new to play. And we had a good bit of fun with this one on the Hadar Center particular map that has one section of it that needs you to decrease numbers once you go over the lip of the museum, for example. I don't know, Danielle, what do you think? Laminated version of this game worth an investment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm assuming they still have the online implementation of this game up?
Yeah. And actually, if you back this Kickstarter, you will have free lifetime access to the web version and all of the features therein. There's like tournament stuff, there's create your own maps and stuff. A lot of extra features on the rolltothetop.com online version.
Okay, that actually might make it even more worth it. I was sort of on the fence about this because we have a bunch of Roll to the Top stuff, and I can't imagine us playing it enough to get through all of the pads of all of the maps that we have, which is, I mean, it's like a solid 1.5 inch box depth of sheets that we have. So I can't imagine us getting all the way through that. And I was like, okay, well, the laminated ones would be nice to have, but they've already printed all the paper sheets, so that's not actually saving anything. But to have that unlimited online access, I think that would actually be more valuable to me, because I think that's a really cool implementation.
Yeah.
And if I'm playing this solo, I'm much more likely to do it if I'm playing it on the computer than I am to just take out a sheet and do a roll and write by myself. That's just not something that I'm likely to do. I know you've done so in the past, but...
Yeah, I mean, ones that are specifically designed for solo play. This one is definitely, you know, more fun with 2 or 3 people when you're passing the dice around.
So yeah, I mean, I think that online implementation adds some value. I'm still kind of on the fence about this one, but if it is a game that you've enjoyed, this is a fairly economical expansion to a game that is very well designed, at least.
Yeah, and I gotta say, if you do not have Roll to the Top at all, jumping in $25 to get, I think it's 9 or maybe 10 different sheets, so 10 different play setting pads that you get in that, plus the dry erase markers and all the dice, it's not that bad of a deal. It's a decent deal.
Do you get the pads as well, or do you just get the laminated sheets?
I am not sure. I will have to check on that. But yeah, I don't
Because honestly, if you don't get the pads, I think this is a better thing to get, because then you can get that without having to print all the paper, and that sort of is the point of laminated sheets.
Well, thanks to the magic of editing, I've just checked and found out that you get just the laminated sheets, and they're double-sided, and you get 5 copies of each of the different sheets. So 5 Burj Khalifas with 5 Tree of Life on the back, or whatever it is. So that's kind of an interesting way of doing it. So if you get the full pack, the $25 pack, you get 6 base ones plus 6 additional special challenge ones. So 12 different maps, double-sided across however many sheets that would be. But yeah, it doesn't come with a pad, so you're not printing out a whole bunch of paper that you're never going to use.
Nice, I like that.
Yeah, that's a really good deal. So yeah, Roll to the Top, Laminate. Next up, we have the final Flicktier. This is coming from Gabe Barrett and his self-publishing studio, Barrett Publishing. This is just now funding above its $10,000 goal with 270 backers. It is ending on Saturday, January 5th, 2019, with an estimated delivery of August 2019. You can get the base edition for $39 and get the expansion added for $49. This is a flicking dexterity-based 4X game that uses neoprene mats as the play area. So if you think about a game like Ascending Empires that we played with Dan a long time ago, that is flicking discs on cardboard, and there's little, targets and everything that you're hitting as you go around. This is that, but with neoprene mats, and you're flicking dice around instead of discs, which comes into play in the combat system. You're exploring for resources, you're upgrading your little tech tree, you're flicking your dice into other dice to win combat, and the thing that I found that was kind of interesting about this, instead of everybody everybody has 3 d6s, each of the 5 or 6 different player factions that come in there have a different die setup. So like one faction has 3 d6s, another one has 2 d4s and a d8. There's one that has, I think, 2 d8s and a d20, which matters because obviously of the way that those dice are specifically going to roll as you flick them. But then you're also going to have that kind of come into play in the combat system, where whatever number at the top of the die is visible when you initiate combat is going to be part of that particular ship's or die's combat power. So that's an interesting way to do that and kind of create a little bit of variability for different players. You seem very non-interested in these things.
I mean, this is not a game that really hits in my wheelhouse. Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of flicking games. I'm not a huge fan of 4X games. So a 4X flicking game
in space
is not really my bag.
Yeah.
It does sound interesting. It's certainly not something I've ever really seen. Like, it does sound a little bit like Ascending Empires, like you had mentioned, but adding in those different factions of dice, so you have different not modes of movement, but different ease of movement, as opposed to how well those numbers are going to show. I'm assuming low numbers are better for you in combat.
Low numbers are worse for you in combat.
Okay, so you could have a D4 which is harder to flick and worse for you in combat?
Yes, it is a weaker ship. So you're going to more likely get a hit.
But why wouldn't you want to take the faction that has better dice then?
because of other powers that particular faction may have.
Better be balanced
They got
if motion and combat are hurt by having D4.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly interesting if it's the kind of thing that sounds like it appeals to you. I feel like this is definitely a Kickstarter where if it sounds like it's your thing, it's worth looking at. If
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like it's your thing, probably don't look at it.
Yeah, I am viewing it with a curious eye because I'm always interested in somebody doing something interesting and new with dice. We had played Ascending Empires, and it's okay. Honestly, my biggest frustration with that game was the way that the components worked. The cardboard mats didn't lay flat, which made a flicking game very difficult.
Yeah, you
But-
couldn't flick over the quarter divides of the board
Yeah.
very easily.
But this thing is going to have a world of 2 neoprene mats, and that's going to hopefully unroll a lot better, and they're going to line up next to each other, and you put that, you might have a little bit of a blip at the lip there, but for the most part, probably a lot easier to flick around a neoprene mat than it is...
You're also rolling a die, which doesn't have to move smoothly.
Yeah.
It's going to move over itself, so it's more likely to go over those bumps.
Mm-hmm.
Neoprene is going to increase your friction quite a bit, though, as opposed to cardboard.
And that's one thing that I was actually kind of interested. The combat in this is not specifically like flick a die real hard and get something to knock way away. It looks like you have like a certain amount of space that you can actually flick a die past where it was, and after that, the die that was being attacked goes into quote-unquote hyperspace and gets away to another ship. So when you're flicking, like you said, you might want a D4 or something that doesn't move quite as much as opposed to a D20 that's going to roll out of control, might have a huge number on it, but might also put the enemy out of reach. So it's a really just weird and interesting mechanic. If you were interested in this thing, you probably knew about 2 minutes ago when I said there was a Space 4X flicking game called the Final Flicktier. It's going to appeal to a very specific set of people, so if that's you, it's there.
One thing that I do think is really smart is that they are using what sounds like is pretty standardized components. So they're going to have to get dice, but they're not going to have to be making a bunch of crazy components for this game. I mean, you make a mat, you make the dice, and whatever else they're going to be adding to that. But in order to get that quick turnaround on a game, because if you look at this, they're ending the campaign in January and they're going to deliver by August, theoretically. If you want to have that kind of turnaround, especially on a self-published game, I think it's smart that they're going with sort of standardized components for a lot of the ships and everything like that.
It's a very good point. All right, well, that is the Final Flicktier.
The last Kickstarter we want to talk about is called the Art of De Architecturart. And this is funding at $43,000 of its $8,000 goal with 895 backers. It ends on December 14th with estimated delivery of March of 2019. There are 2 different pledge levels. There is $25 for just a PDF of the book and $44 for a print version of the book as well as a PDF. Now, what this is De Architecturart has created these maps of fantasy worlds for a couple of years now. They've released, I think they said 4 books in the past. And they are just maps of different settings. There are some layout plans. There are some just 3D pictures of entire villages, really. And it's absolutely beautiful art. And they mean for it to be used in role-playing or any kind of fantasy world creation settings. The thing was that previously they had been released with French text for the French role-playing scenes. And now they are releasing this one book with all of the art that they have released at all in the past. If they've done it, it is going to be in this book, but it's not going to have any text, so there's no language barrier for anybody to overcome when trying to figure out what it is. It's going to have all this beautiful art. And I just saw this and I was like, anybody who's creating a role-playing game, anybody who wants to create a backstory for a character, even if they're not DMing the role-playing game, even anybody who's doing any kind of fiction writing where they're creating a backstory or scenes for their characters to be in, this would be a really valuable resource. And I thought it was a really neat thing. It was so high quality and everything was absolutely so gorgeously rendered that this only has like 4 days left in it. Like I said, it ends on the 14th, so we're recording on, the 9th?
Yeah, the 9th.
Today is the 9th. So I just wanted to mention it really quick, because if this is the kind of thing that you think would be useful to you, you should go in and get it. This is a huge amount of text. They said it's going to be like 108, not text, sorry, of pictures. They said it's going to be like 180 pages of A4, so pretty much letter-sized paper. And it is absolutely beautiful. So you should check it out if this is something that you think you might be able to use.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through their website right now, looking at the covers of the old ones, and oh boy, these are all really cool. Wow. This is awesome stuff. I'm glad that you found this one, because it's not the kind of thing I would have usually stopped at. I don't do really any RPGs, but I'm glad that you had the eye for that, to see that thing, because the art is freaking cool.
It is very much so.
Huh, all right. Well, you've got a few days left on that. The Art of De Architecturart. Did I do okay?
Close enough.
Close enough. All right, time to move on to some games.
Want to wear your draft mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draft mechanic for t-shirts.
One of the cool things about going to PAX Unplugged is I felt like I had a lot more time to talk to and meet a whole bunch of publishers that generally get crowded out when like a Gen Con kind of event. And PAX Unplugged had a lot of publishers that I had not had a chance to talk to in the past, which are the exact same words I just said, but I said them anyway and we're going to keep rolling through it. But I did get a chance to swing by booths of Breaking Games and also Cosmos and check out some of their new stuff, and we're going to talk about those in the recent plays today. Just for full disclosure, these 3 games were all review copies, and I want to get that out of the way before we roll on in. So first up, we have The Stars Align, which is a 2018 release from Breaking Games. Plays 2 players in 15 to 30 minutes. This is designed by Sean Fenimore and Matt Radcliffe, with art by Ian Reed. This is a game of abstract dueling, pattern recognition, trying really hard to pick up the little baby wooden stars.
Yeah. This game has some really neat components, and I think we just hit on one of them right there. It comes in a bag, which actually has the board printed on it. It has a nice, like, night sky design on it, but it has a 7x7 square board, sort of a checkerboard pattern type of thing, but they're all the same color, so a grid. Duh. And then it's got these wooden stars, which are white on one side and natural wood color on the other side. It has a couple of pieces that form a star when you put them all together. They're fifths of a star, so each of the points of a star. And it has a deck of cards. On your turn, what you're going to do is you're going to flip over the top card, and it will have a pattern of 4 stars on it. So your basic tetromino shapes, 4 of them in a row, or maybe an L shape, or a backwards L shape, or a zigzag shape that's usually green, I think, in Tetris, that you have to make sure it's facing the right way. And you are going to place out stars onto the board in that pattern with your colored side up. The object of the game is to create a row or column with all your colored stars. So all 7 are full and they have your colored stars in them. If that happens, you remove all of the stars in that row or column from the board, and you take one of your 5 star portions and lay it in front of you, saying you've completed one of the 5 rows or columns that you need to complete to win the game. Now, you will soon realize that you will not always have room on the board to place the shape that you've drawn off the top of the deck by placing new stars. Once that happens when somebody draws one card that they can't place the stars out onto empty spaces on the board, the placement rules sort of change a little bit. At that point, if you'd like and there is available room, you can still place out all new stars onto the board if that is available via stars having been removed. Or you can flip over stars in order to complete your pattern. You can never flip over all 4 stars of the other color, but you can flip over 3 stars of another color and 1 of your own, or possibly place out 1 of your own stars and flip 3 of another color, or flip any number less than 3 of another player's stars. So say I had a straight line of 4 stars, and Jake had 3 stars on the board in a row, and there was an empty space after that. I could place 1 of my own stars in that empty space and flip all 3 of his. If I had any stars between them, and I chose to flip anything in that pattern, I'd have to flip my own as well. Mm-hmm. So you have to be really careful about where your stars are between the other player's stars, because you don't want to be flipping your own stuff and taking away area that you have on the board. The first player, like I said, to complete 5 rows or columns with their patterns is going to complete their little star, and they will be the winner of the Stars Align.
The best twinkler. Sure. Thematically, the stage where you are flipping over some of the stars is Twinkling of the Night Stars.
You're kidding me.
No, it is. Twinkling.
Course.
I mean, this is a game that's going to appeal to people aesthetically before they play it, I think. The bag is very nice. The wooden stars, the play on the bag, the tetrominos, all that kind of stuff is very attractive and very easy to explain to people. And talking with the people at Breaking Games, they're actually trying to get this game into a major restaurant chain that sells small games. I don't know if I'm supposed to say particularly which one, but you get the idea. And I think it'll really appeal to that crowd because it has that kind of country store kind of look to it. And we get to playing this game, and I played it a few times at PAX, and also we've played it a few times here. And I'm always attracted to one of these little 2-player abstract games, and this one has a lot of things that I really enjoy. I like the positioning. I like having the kind of the interactive mechanic of taking positioning away from another player, and then the components definitely improve that, experience a little bit.
I have sort of pros and cons to the components. Like I said, they are absolutely gorgeous to look at. That bag with the star pattern on it is very nice. It is really nice and simple to see that grid on the bag, so you don't have to worry about a lot of fiddly art that's going to make it hard to see. The stars themselves look really nice. They're just these little wooden thin cutouts of stars. Cool, no problem. We had the biggest issue trying to pick these little stars up for some reason, and I don't know why. I think maybe it's because they have rounded points instead of being sharp points on the stars. They're rounded, so when you go to grab them, your finger slides into the like shoulder of the star and they zoom out of your hand. Whoosh. But they shouldn't be hard to pick up, but they are.
Shooting stars. Yeah.
That's not great for this game, though.
Thematics.
The other little tiny issue I had with the actual components is that when you lay that bag out flat, the edge that has the drawstring on the top of it doesn't really lay entirely flat. So when you're trying to place your stars on that top edge, sometimes they slide a little bit or they get knocked off of the squares. But it's easy enough to figure out where they go because you're only going to have one star on a square at any point. Yeah. So that's not really an issue for me as much as for some reason these things are so dang hard to pick up and I don't know why.
And I will say, I felt the same way, especially when you go to clear off a row and you're going to clear 7 of them out and it's generally in the middle of something. It will take a little bit of time to get used to picking up 7 of these stars in a row. And you're like, I had initially thought, okay, I'll just grab one on the end and then use my hand to slide them down. But the placement, the size of the bag is such that you are going to probably bump a star or two. Thankfully, it's not like it's a hugely complex game where the positioning of your stuff matters that much. It's easy enough to slide a star back into place. And frankly, for the look and the appearance of it, I'm okay giving up that little bit of, I guess, dexterity control.
I agree. I just wanted to bring it up because if you have somebody that you plan on playing this with that has poor motor control, either small children or maybe you wanted to get it to play with like an older person in your life that has a difficult time picking up small objects or fiddly little objects, that's something you might want to consider.
Or if you just have big giant fingers like I do.
Or this unreasonable thing.
But I enjoy the gameplay, and it is something that after 4 or 5 games of it, I have felt like I am learning more about the way the game works. When I'm playing, I want to have my stars around the outside of the board, because I've learned very quickly that if I have 5 out of 7 stars in a row, that's only a good thing if the 2 that I need to flip over are together. If you have, the opponent's stars spaced out on that particular row, it's going to be much harder. It's going to take you multiple turns to make that happen. And that was nice to figure out, but I do feel like if I play that against somebody who's completely new, I might have a chance at walloping them really quickly because I understand the way that I'm going to be playing those particular things.
Well, yeah, and this makes sense, especially for the way they're planning on marketing this. If you're selling this to people who picked it up because it was a cute, kitschy thing that they saw while they were waiting for their table, they're more likely to play it a bunch of times over and over again.
Yeah.
I think it really works well for what they're trying to do. I'm generally not a big fan of 2-player head-to-head dueling style games, like where you are trying to undo what the other player is doing at the same time. That's the kind of abstract I really am not crazy about. We've talked about that before. I know Santorini is one. We just recently talked about War Chest, which, again, it's just not the style of game that I enjoy to play as a 2-player game. But at the same time, this does something really interesting. I like the way that they've used the pattern cards so that you need to prepare for what possible patterns may be coming up, making sure that your placements are in a way that you've built something that you can actually complete, and trying to, I guess, further your own rows and columns while taking out the other player's positioning. I find it really interesting if it's not the kind of game that I'm going to want to play over and over again. And that's just a personal taste issue, not a game quality issue. I think it's a very well done type of game that I'm not crazy about.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I like it. I don't think that every gamer needs a copy of this game, but if you have a hole in your collection of that little 2-player abstract, it's one of the, maybe 20 or 30 ones that you would check out. It's good.
Later in the episode, when we're talking to Eric, he mentions that he got a chance to play TAC and that he really enjoys this kind of 2-player back and forth game. I have a feeling this is something that he would actually like too. It's got a simple mechanism, very much like TAC, where you have like 3 rules that you need to learn, and then it's really all about what you do with what you have. And I think that any gamer that likes, your chess or your something like TAC is going to enjoy the Stars Align.
I think this one is also going to be one that stays in our meetup game bags for a long time, because a quick 2-player, easy-to-learn abstract like that is perfect for new gamers that are just wandering through and want to know what this event is.
It's also just, it's in a nice condensed package in that bag where everything can just be sort of balled up and thrown in your bag or your purse or in the back of the pocket in your car seat or whatever. It really lends itself to being portable and being that game you have on hand, even if it does have all those little stars, which maybe you don't want to lose.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier than throwing, even a Cosmos 2-player size box into something.
Yeah.
Like, I could throw this in my purse and it would live there forever.
Yes. All right. Well, that is The Stars Align.
Next up, we are talking about Drop It, which is a 2018 release from Cosmos. It plays 2 to 4 players in 20 minutes. The designers are Bernhard Lack and Uwe Rapp. This is a game of dropping stuff and it bouncing and then it touching stuff it's not supposed to touch. And that's pretty much it.
So if you have not seen a picture of Drop It, the best way can I explain this game is imagine if you had Connect 4, but it was Connect None. Make sense?
Sort of.
So you've got this board that is kind of the double-layered clear plexiglass, and you're going to be dropping pieces in from above, and they're going to slide down. And your goal is to have no pieces of the piece you drop. You don't want to touch one of the same color or of the same shape. There's also a border around the outside that has either specific colors or shapes that you don't want to touch in that particular area as well. Each player is going to get their own color of shapes in a 4-player game. In 3 and 2-player games, you split them up differently. But you have small circles, you have triangles, you have, what is that, a rhombus, I guess, and a square. Is that a rhombus?
Parallelogram,
some kind of, diamond shape parallelogram. But you will take turns dropping from above, and assuming that you do not have it touch a like color or like shape or the border that particularly negates that one, you will score points. It's kind of split horizontally as you go up with kind of wonky levels, but 1 point up to 8 points at the very top. So your scores are going to escalate as the game goes on. And there's also little circle areas that you will see in the plastic, whatever, that are 1, 2, and 3 points, the 3 being the smallest circle, and if your shape overlaps one of these circles, you will gain those additional points. So you're going to continue to go around dropping things into the top until you run out of pieces, and then at the end, the person who has the most points, believe it or not, will be the person who wins. Pretty simple. Not a whole lot of complexity to this game. It is a fun, bright, colorful game that is, I really feel like saying Connect None is a good way to explain it to a lot of people. You want to have stuff not touch stuff of the same kind.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I wouldn't necessarily draw that from the phrase Connect None. But it is a very dead simple game, in theory. It is also kind of difficult once you get to play it, because a lot of times you're going to be dropping stuff in, and there's only so many colors and shapes. So when you've got 3 or 4 shapes that are already on the row that you're dropping into, that's really negating a lot of the things that you have a chance to score points if you drop in.
Yeah.
Also, these little wooden pieces bounce off each other quite a bit, more than I would have expected. So you drop in a square flat side down and you're thinking, oh, it's just going to land. But it hits just in the right way that it bounces and it hits against the sidewall, and maybe the sidewall is the same color, and you don't get any points for that.
Yeah, there is a variant in there. It comes with these tokens that allow you to nullify a nullified score. So you basically have a mulligan of oh no, I get those points anyway, which kind of feels like a cheap way to do it. But at the same time, with the amount of bouncing you get, it kind of makes some of those turns worthwhile at all.
I was talking about this with Bert at game night, and I feel like that's really there because Cosmos does a lot of family games, and if you are playing this with kids, particularly younger kids, they're going to get frustrated with this, because I know in a couple of our games, the first several pieces I dropped, I didn't really get much of any points until I had gotten a couple of cool angles that would keep stuff from bouncing into other things. I wasn't getting points. And if you play this with a bunch of kids and they drop something in the wrong spot and they get really frustrated, they're not going to want to keep playing. So if you give them these 2 cheater tokens that allow you to take the points of something, even if it technically wouldn't score, I think it's going to make it a lot more family friendly.
You're very right about that. I have enjoyed it. I think it's fun. We saw it played a lot at PAX Unplugged, and we played it a good bit in the, out of con hours time, because it is a really simple and, have a beer or something kind of game. And I'm struggling to say more about it. It's good. It's fun.
It's a very simple game. There's not a whole lot to say.
I will say, I do like the fact that it comes with a second set of inserts for the border. So like I said, it'll either be colors or shapes, but it's not halfway up it becomes shapes. You have different inserts that slide down in. The basic setup they encourage you to use is colors on the bottom and the sides, but there's also a set that slides in and it says you can't have, a diamond touches this section of the border. And we actually found, and the more we've played it, the shapes one is surprisingly difficult compared to the colors one. I think it comes down to, especially in a two-player game, if you have a two-player game and you're doing colors, there's only one color on either side, and it's kind of balanced out so that everybody has one side they can't touch. With shapes, everybody has all the shapes, so there's always a side you can't touch with a particular piece, and that makes it more challenging as you're working your way up on the board. So it is a little bit more challenging, and it does give you a little bit more to think about, but you're not going to get it's not a super deep, complex dexterity game, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I was sort of lukewarm on this one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that you had this big, giant plastic thing that you had to set up in the middle of the table, and that was not really terribly appealing to me. And the box is fairly large, so if you're going to be bringing this places, you're spending a lot of bag real estate for this plastic thing that you need to play the game. And okay, maybe you play it two times, maybe 3 times, and then it's okay. I got the novelty of that. It's done. I also had a little bit of an issue. There were times where we dropped pieces into this little plastic chute, and I think the plastic must not be perfectly even on the inside, so either stuff got stuck not touching where you would think that it would based on the way gravity works, or it bounced up and it hit the side in a certain way, so you didn't get a bounce, or you did get a bounce. It wasn't perfect. I mean, obviously it's a piece of plastic that was manufactured probably a couple of months ago and then shipped and then packed and then shipped. There's going to be a little bit of variability in that. It doesn't destroy the game because it's a 20-minute game, and if you get one bounce that's not the way you thought it would be, oh well.
Yeah.
Get over it. But I don't know. It was fine.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite Cosmos game.
I'm glad
but it's not a bad one.
I'm glad you said that about the plastic because I wasn't sure if that was me just wondering or if that was actually true. But
did you think things could hover?
No, did you have a hovering thing?
We had one where the circle bounced up and it would have landed on another circle and it just stopped.
Really?
It got pinched in the plastic in a point where it was a little bit... Like
well,
it would have rolled down and it just didn't roll the way it would have.
I see. Well, check your drop it for warps and
it
wobbles.
Was once in a great number of games. But yeah, I mean, there are times where you're going to be like, oh, hey, that wasn't fair. But I guess you get the points for that.
Yeah. If you're having a rowdy time, as we did at PAX Unplugged, we had a few days where we were playing a 4-player game and it was just like everybody cheering after every piece or, that kind of stuff. And it can be fun in the right circumstance, but this isn't a put it in your heavy Euro game night kind of light game. Like, there's some games that fit for that, right? But there's some games that, this is not... I'm not going to take an extra 5 minutes to set up this plastic contraption in the middle of Euro game night.
No, probably not.
Yeah. But if you like having that and you want to play a thing with, a whole family and just drop a bunch of stuff, then maybe that's the space for Drop It. Finally, we have Trellis, 2018 release from Breaking Games, plays 2 to 4 players in 20 to 30 minutes. This is designed by Teal Fristo, with art by Vicky Chu. This is a game of tile placement, route control, and bloomin' onions. Onions?
No.
No, why did you make me say that?
I assumed you would read it before you spoke.
No, we don't read before... Yeah, no. Okay, tell us about Trellis, D.
There's no onions, there's just blooming. In Trellis, you are going to be laying tiles out which have different patterns of vines. Think like Tsuro, if you've ever seen a Tsuro tile. Mm-hmm. It's a hexagon-shaped tile that's got a bunch of different vine patterns going across it in a couple of the 6 different colors of vines that are in the game. You're going to start with a central tile that has all 6 of them branching off on one in each direction on the hexagon. And then on your turn, you're going to have a hand of 3 tiles in front of you, and you're going to lay one of them out. You do not need to connect like color vines because that would become very difficult very quickly. But if you do, you are going to get a benefit for it. When you place the tile out, you are going to take one of the wooden flowers that you have. Everybody starts with 15 wooden flowers. And you are going to place it onto one of the 3 vines on the tile that you have just placed. Think Carcassonne, if you've heard us talk about Carcassonne.
Carcassonne!
No, Trellis.
Sorry.
So you're going to place one of your flowers onto one of the vines on the hexagonal tile you just placed. If that vine connects to any unclaimed vines of the same color, so when you place your first tile, theoretically you're going to connect a vine to the similar color on the start hexagon, since they're all there, you can then bloom onto those unclaimed vines. That means you'll be able to place one of your flowers onto the section on any connecting hexagons that are the same color. So it does benefit you to connect like color to like color. If the tile you've placed managed to connect like color to like color on any claimed vines, then the owner of those vines, because only one person can own each color of vine that has a continuous section, is going to be allowed to bloom their flowers out onto that tile before you place yours. If it's you, good, you get to place more flowers. If it's another player, they're going to get to place their own flowers, but you are going to get a benefit for helping that player. When you place your flower out onto the vine on that tile, you are going to get to place onto a second vine as well. If all the vines on that tile are claimed, you'll get to place on any unclaimed vine on the board. So it does benefit you to help other players, but you don't want to help them out too much because the first player to place their last flower, the 15th flower, onto the board is going to be the winner of the game. And when you place a tile, other connected vines bloom onto the board before you are allowed to place your flower onto the tile. So say Jake has 1 flower left and I have 2, and I'm going to place a tile that is going to allow me to place 2 flowers out. I'm going to get to place my 1, and then I'll connect it to a similar color. Well, he's going to get to bloom his flower before I place, so he'll place his final flower before I get to place mine. So it's really very interesting the way you need to balance out helping other players to place more of your own flowers and to claim more vines with making sure you're not allowing somebody to get too far ahead of you and create too good of a path to place multiple flowers on a turn in order to win the game before you get a chance to place yours. It's fairly simple, but once you get to play it, there's a lot to think about in this game.
This was one of the larger floor real estate focuses that Breaking Games had at their booth, and I understand why. Yeah, I mean, this is a game that is very attractive. The art on the tiles is very nice, good, clean colors of vines, and the vines are different depending on color.
Yeah, so if you can't see the colors, you will still be able to tell the vines apart.
Mm-hmm. And you have a nice, a good selection of tiles. Like, there's a lot in there. We'd never even come close to getting through half of them in a 2-player game, and plenty for a 4-player game. We didn't even come close to running out there either. Mm-hmm. So you get a good bit of variability. The flowers are all the same shape, which might be a problem for some color blindness. I'm not really sure about how those colors are going to balance out. I would have loved to have seen different shapes for those as well, just so you have a little bit more distinction between the players.
Or even just a way to mark them with like a letter or a color, or like not a color, but a shape or something.
Yeah. Some kind of a symbol.
Which you could do if you bought this game.
Yeah, you could always...
It shouldn't be on the player to mark them for colorblind friendly, but you could definitely do it.
Yeah, so component quality, nice, good size box, all that stuff.
Some of the flowers were not entirely flower-shaped. The wood pieces were not cut all the petals, but I think maybe one in every color had one of those. It wasn't a huge deal, but the art was the main standout for me. Like, I really enjoyed that. I also want to call out the insert, because so often you get tile placement games where the wells in the insert are not deep enough to hold all the dang tiles that you need to, and so when you turn the box sideways, everything goes everywhere and it's a big mess. This one had nice deep wells, so you had plenty of room for tiles. I can't imagine it's for an expansion, because all you would get is just more tiles, and that wouldn't be very helpful in this game.
Special tiles with special flowers.
But I really liked that it was well done. I didn't feel like I was just going to have a mess when I opened the box every time.
Yeah, and I feel this was a good game to have as kind of that feature game at PAX Unplugged. PAX Unplugged had a wider range of people, from casual gamers that had never been to a tabletop event before, all the way up to heavy gamers like, myself, who's super deep in the hobby, I guess, and I would have gone anyway. But it's it draws the eye, and it's got good, good table presence. It has a nice look to it with the colors, and it's not, it's another theme. It's, vines and something attractive like that, not just any number of things it could have been as tile placement. Like, this could have been a game about roads, really.
But it would have been way less pretty as a game about roads. Way less pretty.
But I will say, I'm a sucker for a tile-laying game, and
Obviously.
I enjoy that. I enjoyed this particular tile-laying game. I like being able to connect stuff. I like that I'm not forced to always match up all the sides of it. I will say, though, I feel like I want to play this game interactively. I want to be putting my tiles down to stop your particular vines, but I'm also not super rewarded to do so. Like, if I have a tile that I can use to impact you, but I can also use somewhere else, it's probably more advantageous for me to use it somewhere else and get multiple chains off of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a certain amount of interaction you need to consider in this game, since anytime you connect like color to an unclaimed like color off of the tile, you are going to be able to place points. If I see that there's a spot where you can place a single tile and place out maybe connecting to two different same color vines. Like, there's a green vine and then a spot and then another green vine. I'm going to make sure that I block that off with something else. If I don't have a green vine, I'm going to block it off with another color anyway, because that's 3 of your flowers. That's a fifth of your flowers you could place out in one go.
Right.
And I think it's really important to make sure that you set yourself up for those opportunities, but also that you block off another player. There are also certain points when it will be really useful to give what the game calls a gift, which is allowing another player to, which is the extra flower you get when you allow another player to bloom on your turn. So that you could claim 2 different vines. Like, there is very often a point in the game where you have a tile that could bloom onto 2 adjacent tiles if you placed it. But if you haven't claimed any of those vines yet, you're going to miss out on one of them and leave it open for the other player.
Yeah.
But if you can manage to get it so that you offer a gift when you place a tile, if there are no available vines with which to use that gift, you get to place it anywhere on the board. So, maybe I place a tile in a 3-player game that gives both other players a gift. It may not be super optimal for me. I may only get to place 1 flower on the board for that turn, but I'll get to place 2 anywhere that I want. So it's really important that you pay attention to that, because you can actually boost yourself into a really advantageous position.
It is at this point in the review that Jake realizes he never wants to use that particular mechanic while playing this game. I'm interested to see how that would work with a 4-player group of people that have played it once or twice and want to aggressively play it to block off other players. Because I feel like then you're going to be using that gift more regularly, and might be an interesting way to play that with a denser field.
If you just play this game being snipey to other players, you're not going to win. You need to be making your own opportunities as well. But if you can look at the board and see where there is a space that is really advantageous to one of the tiles in your hand, taking that opportunity when it's there, I think is what puts you ahead of the other players. Because this is essentially a race, and you start with the same number of flowers, if everybody just plays out the same number of flowers on every turn, the first player is going to win every time.
All right.
I mean, that's just how numbers work.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to push yourself ahead and take those extra 1 or 2 flowers when you can get them.
I do kind of wonder, after people get good at this game, is it always an advantage to have that first player?
Well, because you're not always being given the same tiles, it may not be. There is a little bit of randomness in this game in what you draw. You do have a 3-tile hand with which to play, but there are certainly going to be times where you don't have a specific color. Like, in our last game, there was a point where there was a green vine that had 2 connecting pieces coming into it, and if all I needed was a 1 hex corner loop that was green, I had no green in my hand. So I was like, okay, what I need to do is block this off, because if it gets back to you, that's going to be a problem for me. That's 3 flowers, and we were near the end of the game that would have won it for you.
I may have had that specific piece.
Yeah, you did, but it didn't get back to you.
No curses!
Because I think I did give you a gift and allow myself to place extra flowers on that turn. So it's really about the give and take of this game, and that's why I like this game so much. If you haven't figured it out, I know I haven't said it yet, but I really like this game quite a bit.
Well, cool. Well, I'm glad that you've enjoyed it so much, and now I'm going to have to play it again.
I do want to say that a game called Trellis should have a 3-dimensional element to it, because that's sort of the point of a trellis, but that's neither here nor there.
Expansion content. Well, maybe when we go back to play another game of Trellis, we'll want to use one of these beers. For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. How's that for a masterful...
I'm sorry, what?
How's that for a masterful segue, said Jake as he smoothly moved into the next segment.
It's so good. So good.
All right, everybody, we are at the On Tap segment where we take a game and come up with good beer pairings, or rather, Danielle comes up with good beer pairings, and then I flub the segue. So yes, we are talking about Trellis, the game we just spoke about, the 2018 release from Breaking Games, 2 to 4 players, 20 to 30 minutes, designed by Teal Fristo, art by Vicky Chu. Danielle, start us off with one of the beers.
Sure. From Crooked Stave Artisan Beer Project in Denver, Colorado, we have Trellis Buster. This is a double IPA that is 8% ABV. It is a resinous imperial IPA that is brewed with more hops of the Azaka, Citra, Motueka, and Simcoe variety than they have ever used before.
More than ever before.
And I feel like, in case you don't know this, I should sort of preface this by saying there are a lot of IPAs in this on tap because hops grow on a trellis.
No.
That is how you... Some people don't know that, dude.
Oh,
it's fine.
Fair.
So hops grow on a trellis. When you have a lot of hops, it may break the trellis, which is where Trellis Buster comes from. But you are going to see an IPA-heavy list because people like to talk about hops. Mm-hmm. It's very popular in the beers.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of hops, from Verdant Brewing Company...
Oh, hey, you didn't let me finish. They come in 12-ounce cans.
Oh, okay. May I?
Yes.
Speaking of hops, nailing another segue, here's Jake. Verdant Brewing Company in Falmouth, Cornwall, England has Bloom. It's a New England IPA, 6.5% ABV, a New England IPA brewed with Mosaic and Columbus hops. They say it tastes like dank blueberry muffins. Okay.
I mean, I get what they're going for there. It has a fruity character, and they talk about balancing it with the malt a little bit, and a lot of hoppy beers are considered dank, just that sort of hop flavor has a very dank flavor to it. But when you say the words dank blueberry muffin to me, I'm like, but this was rated 3.99 on Untappd, so a lot of people have to be thinking it's pretty good. So
dank muffins, bruh.
Obviously.
And it's available in 16-ounce cans. See? I remembered.
Nice. Next up from Cascade Brewing Company in Portland, Oregon, we have The Vine. This is an American wild ale that is 8.3% ABV. It is a blend of soured triple, golden, and blonde ales that is fermented with white wine grapes, or the juice from white wine grapes, and it comes in their traditional 750 milliliter bottle that they do. I mean, if you've seen the big Cascade bottles that cost an arm and a leg, this is one of those.
Yeah.
They don't do it all the time. I know they just recently submitted the 2014 release to a competition, and it won like 37th best beer in all of Oregon or something like that. But it is released periodically and rotating, and it just depends on how long they're aging it in those barrels.
Mm-hmm. The Vine is probably my favorite or second favorite thing that Cascade puts out. When I was out there a few years ago, they had it direct off of the barrel.
Nice.
And it blew my mind. If you are in the Portland area and you have not yet been to the Cascade Barrel House, that Barrel House tap room is astonishing, amazing, and so good. And the Vine was great, and they had so much other good stuff. I'm super excited, and we talked about this when we talked about Burn Pile, that one of the former barrel blenders is now in charge of the barrel program at Burial Beer Company. Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll get some Cascade quality stuff out here on the East Coast.
I mean, I would venture to say we have already, but you know.
Touche. I'm a big fan of the sour beer. All right, up next from Fieldwork Brewing Company in Berkeley, California, we have In Bloom. It's a double IPA, 8.2% ABV, and Danielle has left the note, seriously, just read the Untappd description. Here we go. I have not yet read this. With loud flavors of bruised fruit and crushed citrus, In Bloom Double IPA is a super soaker filled with juice, blasting your palate at will. Its hazy appearance foreshadows the juicy hop flavor approaching, eventually bogging down your senses with notes of ruby red grapefruit juice, candied peaches, and fresh-picked melon. With a soft bitterness, a full body, and a blend of British base malts, In Bloom can be sessionably chewy while accentuating the battalion of hops coating your mouth. While you are busy trying to sing along with a melody of hops, please stay aware that you are drinking a fairly big beer, and restraint is suggested. In Bloom Double IPA might drink like an acoustic ballad, but its flavor profile is smashing your guitar through stage monitors. Enjoyed best with good friends and rock and roll.
I couldn't condense that down into like two small phrases to stick at the end of that.
Oof. That sounds like a beverage. Quite the beverage. Cool. So this is Draft and Crowlers at their multiple locations.
Yeah, they look like they have locations all across California, so...
I don't know anything about Fieldwork. I gotta check them out at some point.
Finally, we have from Boundary Brewing in Belfast, Northern Ireland, their gift series. This is a rotating stout series that they do. It has 8-ish% ABV, but it has gone significantly lower than that on some of their incarnations of this. They brewed at least 5 of these stout series, and it changes every time that they brew it. Boundary is a member-owned co-op brewery, which I think is really kind of neat. They sort of kickstarted the beginning of their brewery, and when you started the brewery, you were a member, and if they are profitable after 3 years, the members will make a decision whether or not they are going to be taking dividends or they want to reinvest it back into the brewery.
Cool.
Or at least that's what it says on their website is going to happen. You can still buy in for sort of a share of this. I think it's $100 for a membership fee, and there are some perks, like there are some members-only events that they do during the year, but mostly you're just helping this brewery get its production rolling and everything like that.
Nice.
Their art is also really, really neat. It's something I wanted to point out. It's all done by John Robinson, and it's an abstract style. It looks very much just like abstract, very rich paintings, and it's all on their bottles. They do 12-ounce bottles, and they release gift in 12-ounce bottles as well. So if you have availability for Boundary Brewing, I'd be very curious to see if there's sort of a difference between the different incarnations of the gift brewing, if you've had a chance to try it, and if you are not a regular there, but you are coming through, it is something to certainly check out, because I had to get something that wasn't an IPA or a sort of a really intense sour on this list. I needed to get something on the dark end of the spectrum.
I would be fine drinking the vine for the rest of my days.
Okay, well, some
nice.
people wouldn't be.
All right, for more information on those beers, of course, hit up the show notes section at the website draftmechanic.net. And now it is time for us to bring on a special guest as we talk with Eric Buscemi about PAX Unplugged.
In City of Gears from Grey Fox Games, you'll be exploring and exploiting new locations to further your own interests, while using your power to make sure your foes can't do the same.
Players will discover and complete buildings in the previously unfinished steam-powered city and make connections to refine their game engine by chaining actions and gaining extra abilities. Be careful though, because other players can spend electricity to knock your worker out of a location and destroy the connections you've made.
Whichever player has managed to gain the most prestige restoring the city by opening day will be known as the founder of the City of Gears.
Check it out at your game store of choice or on greyfoxgames.com.
Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted.
Okay, so we are back and we have a special guest. Special guest Eric, introduce yourself.
Hey, Jake. Thanks for having me on. This is Eric Buscemi. I write the Cardboard Hoard blog, and I'm also one of the co-founders of Punchboard Media.
Hooray! Yeah,
Punchboard Media!
We've decided to have Eric come join us because Eric was also in attendance at PAX Unplugged this weekend, so it'd be good to have another person's experiences, and also because Eric, we forgot to record at PAX Unplugged.
Yeah, you make all these plans to do things because you think, oh, it's this big convention, but then you realize it's not like 4 or 5 days long like Gen Con and Origins are, and I just had to cram everything in like 2 days, and that like many other things I meant to do fell by the wayside.
Yeah, this is the first con that I've done any demoing at, and that definitely took a huge portion of my time, but I was really impressed with how tightly packed the whole convention was as a whole. Like you said, it's 3 days. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it's all open until pretty much just like hard cut at midnight. They start kicking everybody out of the big open gaming room. That was kind of a surprise to me.
Yeah, the expo hall, the exhibitors, that's open till 6. That's open like say 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. And then the gaming, the open gaming area, which is in the same room, but it's like 2/3 of the other room, maybe down to half the room this year. Actually, now that I think about it, but yeah, that's open till midnight. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is the one big change they could make. Is leaving that room, letting it be a 24-hour convention.
Yeah. That was a big surprise to me, especially after doing, smaller cons, Dice Tower Con, Geekway, where they have a whole bunch of late-night gaming.
I mean, that may be something to do with the rules of the Philadelphia Convention Center. It may be in the contract that you have to be out by a certain time for whatever facilities maintenance they want to do.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, and that very well may be true, but that won't stop me from complaining about it.
Hey, that's the way
and
it works.
And for the record, it also didn't stop me from gaming after midnight. I know one night I went. You didn't join me, but after we played After the Empires, I went over to that whiskey night meetup.
Oh yeah,
and there were like over 100 people there. Lots of industry insider types too, and other media folk. And then it started to peter out because I didn't get there till late, and then. We actually sat down and wound up playing the Architects of the West Kingdom.
Oh, okay.
Until like 3 a.m, and we were like the last people in the lobby of the, what was it, a Home to Suites or whatever that hotel was called.
What time did you start playing Architects of the West Kingdom?
I mean, it was honestly probably like 1:15, 1:30.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't.
And then I was teaching 3 people that didn't know how to play, and I had only played once, so.
So this wasn't we started it at midnight. Oh, this was a terrible idea kind of game.
No. Once I got the teaching, it went pretty smoothly. It was probably 75, 80 minutes to play the whole game.
Yeah. So, PAX Unplugged, from what I've gathered, they haven't really released any actual attendance numbers yet, but I hear everywhere from 25 to 35K. Do you think that is pretty accurate from what you felt being around at the center?
Yes, I will say that this is the second time I've went. I was at the inaugural PAX Unplugged last year, and last year it felt like Origins light.
Okay.
And I believe Origins averages 17K, 17,000, give or take. So it felt like a little smaller than Origins. And this was also that last year it was during BGG Con.
Yes.
So obviously there were people that couldn't be in two places at once from the publishing end, the designing end, the industry end. I don't know how much attendance it affected as far as your average con goer. But I know from that aspect, it definitely affected who in the industry could be there. Yeah. And this year, the exhibitor hall definitely seemed bigger. Yeah. Without it having with it having that 2-week buffer from BGG Con. Yeah. But this year, so yeah, last year I said it felt like Origins light. I would say it felt like maybe 15,000 people. But this is I didn't count, but this is kind of what I've heard through the grapevine. This year it felt like Gen Con light.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely feel that. I was really surprised that was
what
more
25 crowded
to 35 feels like, yeah. Yeah, I've only ever we've done Gen Con, and then we've done the smaller kind of like the Geek Way to the West size stuff, and then obviously like your 200 or 300 person things. We haven't had a chance to do Origins yet. So to hear to me that PAX Unplugged this year was roughly twice the size of Origins is really kind of a surprise to me. I didn't understand that perspective on Origins. I thought it was, I guess, a lot bigger than what we...
And you know what? I'll say this. Origins is 5 days long.
Yeah.
And the people that go to Origins are there every day. Mm-hmm. So depending on how this attendance is measured, it may not be that much bigger than Origins. And it's also... all right, it's not in a smaller space, but all of the board games are in one centralized area in PAX Unplugged. So the second floor of the convention center, everything was in that, like, we'll call it an airplane hangar, because that's what it feels like. It's one giant open space, and that's where like everything pretty much. There were a few rooms off of like the the Unpub room and the classic Cardboard room were in a side hallway right off that, and Greater Than Games had a demo booth. But everything was in that general area, so it felt, even though it was a large space, it was all pretty tight together. But then on the floor below that, on the first floor, all the RPG stuff was there.
Oh, okay.
There were rooms and rooms and rooms and rooms of RPG stuff down there.
Yeah.
And since the overlap between RPG gaming, where you're just going to go and you're going to sit down for 3 or 4 hours at a table, isn't really big with tabletop gaming, where you can play these shorter games, you're playing a lot of games, and you're demoing new games. I think it was bigger than it felt because we didn't see a lot of those RPG gamers ever.
Yeah.
Like my friend
think
Manny was in the
downstairs more than
RPG
once.
area. And he had dinner with us, but other than having dinner with us and then playing After the Empires with us, I didn't see him at all because he played like 4 one-shot RPGs. And that was his weekend. I know a lot of people were into that idea of the gaming convention.
Well, I mean, that's like a Gen Con. When you walk, if you are in a Skywalk-connected hotel, if you walk through, you go past all of these rooms and you see huge ballrooms full of people who are doing all kinds of RPG events, and you're like, oh, I guess there are people over here doing this stuff too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never even considered that about this particular thing. Obviously, because I spent all my time in the airplane hangar of an expo hall.
Yeah, and Origins is the same thing. They have the RPGs off in those little smaller conference rooms, and again, it's also in between the main thing and the Skyway too. So a very similar vibe in that way. But there's also the gaming stuff at Origins is kind of all over the place too. There's little areas down every corridor. It's more spread out. And the open gaming was like in like a back broom closet at Origins. But that we are not here to talk about that. Don't get me wound up.
No, I have heard many a story of the open gaming at Origins. And I got to say, the open gaming area at PAX Unplugged was pretty dang big. That was a lot of tables and a lot of space.
It was. And it filled up too, which was just outrageous to me how that many tables just filled up, and it got loud.
Yeah, no question.
It was, you just thousands of people and tables, and I'm not like no one was yelling or anything, but it was, you definitely had to use your outdoor voice to be heard at your own table.
So from being in the expo hall myself a good bit of the time, I came into this expecting to see a lot more casual gamers and non-gamers coming through the booth and, talking to us and checking out the Gray Fox game stuff. I was surprised, and I don't know if this is just because, again, no BGG con overlap, but I felt like I was getting a lot of people that were heavier gamers coming through. Like, did you notice a big difference in the kind of the level of gamer that there was this year versus last year at PAX Unplugged?
I'm going to say no, but I'll give you the caveat that most of the time I spent in the exhibitor area was on Sunday during Family Day.
Okay.
And I was walking around with my wife and my 2 young children, and we were also going to booths where there would be things that would interest them.
Makes sense.
So I think that's not a very good overall view, but that was my personal view. And I also think that's because you were in the Gray Fox booth.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to draw a specific kind of people.
Yeah.
Well, I think also the people who can take a couple of days vacation between Thanksgiving and Christmas for a whole weekend con are probably people who are interested in gaming. Sunday, you have families that can come in just for one day and do the family day thing because Philadelphia is fairly well connected to a lot of things on the East Coast. I mean, you can jump on a train from a lot of places and go to Philadelphia. But, like, if you're able to take Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in late November, early December, you probably care about this.
Yeah, no question. I was kind of surprised as well, and I think this is just a function of this being such a growing con. I felt like we had a lot of publishers that were actually doing releases at PAX Unplugged, which is another thing that I was surprised to see. Like for Gray Fox Games, we had City of Gears available for the first time, and I know I saw a number of other things. I think Bonacor over at the Stronghold Games booth had some first-time releases or some stuff he was able to ship in. And I guess it really is an interesting function of the growth of it, plus the name of PAX, that this is going to become the second major U.S. convention. I'm like, considering how bigger it is than Origins already, do you think that this one is going to continue to grow?
I don't know how much room there is for it to grow because they were already getting close to selling out.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we'll see it get much bigger, but yeah, I don't know. I felt, as far as the new release thing goes, I felt like this is like the last hurrah of the year.
Yeah.
Like, the convention season starts around Origins, like for the big conventions, and then you got the UK Games Expo, and then you roll into Gen Con and Essen, and then you have BGG Con, which used to be the last, industry convention of the year, and now this one is just like 2 weeks after that. So this is the last chance for people to hype their, especially like. I think with Kickstarter games, like they meant to have these out by Essen or they meant to have them out by Gen Con.
Yeah.
But sometimes things happen and, they got delayed or whatever. And now they're like, this is my last chance to get them on the books for this year and make back some of those production costs. So I don't know that they were necessarily intended to be released at PAX Unplugged, or there was just a happy accident that PAX Unplugged existed, so they didn't have to try and wait to Origins to really, unload their stock of these things that they may have missed their Essen dates on.
Yeah.
And that's just total speculation on my part.
So how do you feel as somebody who goes to Origins? You go to Origins.
I do. Yeah. Origins is the one convention here I fly to.
So now that you have convention season that is a month and a half longer, how does that make your year feel?
I mean, I think for me it's great because I get to go to that in June, and then this is now in December. So they're 6 months apart. Those are the two big cons I go to.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
It's like every 6 months. And this one, and for me, Philadelphia is a 2-hour drive.
Oh, that's great.
So
it is really nice to have something big on the East Coast like this, because I feel like we've always had, everything's in the Midwest. You got Origins, you got Gen Con, those are all right next to each other. Texas is far, far away from all of us, and I think just the diehard BGGers get to go to that one at this point.
Well, next year they're going to be so much bigger because they're moving locations.
Yeah, very true.
So I think that'll change your attendance at PAX U as well. Not necessarily decreasing it, because I'm sure there'll be new people coming in to take the spots of anybody going to BGG Con. But I have a feeling a lot of people are going to go to BGG Con next year to see what the new deal is and whether or not they're going to be going to that on the regular.
Yeah. I'm surprised we don't have a major convention out towards the west yet. Like there's in Denver.
I mean, there's PAX Prime.
Well, yeah, okay. But, that's definitely more of a video game based thing.
And now There, MeepleCon, which
Yeah.
was is in Las Vegas, Nevada, is now going to be Dice Tower West.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
they'll
I'm
have
really,
Shucks is
that.
in Vancouver.
yeah, okay, good point. Shucks is out that way too. So we are starting to see those things pop up. I'm really happy for Crystal, and because I know she's going to be super heavily involved in Dice Tower West. And if I lived out that way, I would definitely go to that because I bet that's going to be a lot of fun. And they have In-N-Out
Yeah,
Burger out
agreed.
there.
Yeah, that alone is worth it. I'm with you on that.
So what, other than, the increase in size, what felt different about PAX Unplugged to you this year versus last year? So I know PAX is the kind of con that runs a lot differently. They're very much more of a lines-oriented kind of thing. I guess, actually, one question I have for you. Did they have the metal detectors thing going last year?
No, and that would be my other big complaint for this second year would be to get rid of that, because I don't actually think it increased security at all. I just think it increased the wait time to get in. And I'll give you a
very rarely increase security.
I will give you a very specific example. I walked in through the metal detector and I beeped, and I'm like, it's probably my belt buckle.
Yeah.
So they wave it at my belt buckle and it doesn't go off. So then the guy, he's waving it up and down me, and it starts beeping on my ankle. Now, I don't have I didn't have ankle surgery. I don't have like a metal ankle or anything. I don't even have, I was wearing like slippers, like slip-on shoes. I didn't even have, shoelaces or eyelets or anything. There was literally nothing. And eventually he just gave up and he just let me in. So this thing isn't beeping on things that are metal. It is beeping on things that aren't metal. And then you think about it, everyone's coming in with the game bag, right? Filled with games. They're not opening the game boxes and looking into the components, because then the line, you would be there all day. So that's my my thing on that.
It was odd, and I don't know if that was a PAX thing or a Philadelphia Convention Center thing.
I don't think it could be a convention center thing because it wasn't there last year.
Oh, good point.
They could have put them in the last year.
They could have put it in the last year, and I feel like I saw that on some of the doors somewhere. Oh no, and they were way gone on Sunday at 6 o'clock, 6:05. They were completely gone, and I was just running back and forth between the room and the exhibit hall that whole evening. They were going fast.
And for me personally, like I enjoyed being able to go over the market for lunch.
Yeah.
And grab a quick bite, but then to have to come back in through the metal detectors, I was like, it's not worth it. I'm going to eat awful food in their little food court to just not have to deal with that metal detector line again.
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe the food court hired them so that you would eat the food at the convention center.
It's all a big hot dog conspiracy.
Yeah, but chicken fingers in my case. But yeah, it was pretty gross.
Speaking of food, so we had Reading Terminal Market across the street there. I had a chance to go there once or twice. I got a good cheesesteak. I got some really good wings, full plank and leg kind of wings that were fantastic. And I know that Origins has an exceptionally good food market as well. How do the two compare?
Oh, they're both awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I find things I love at both of them, but again, Origins doesn't metal detect me on the way back in, so it's easier to go over there.
Yeah,
and they're both like very, very close. They're both like across the street from the convention center. So I had donuts at the Reading Terminal Market and coffee. That was my breakfast, and it was delicious. It's like an Amish donut place.
Nice. I had a pretty good cheesesteak I was pretty happy about.
Also, speaking of food, we had Chinatown together on Friday night. We went into their little Chinatown in Philadelphia, and we had a really delicious meal, and we didn't even have to wait online. And this was Friday night at like 6:30.
Yeah.
Sat right down.
This is a thing that I did not know about where the convention center was in Philly, and within like the first half hour of being in the area, I was rooming with Josh from Gray Fox Games as well, and he is very deep into Chinese culture and understands the food a lot. Every single meal that we had, he's like, let's go down this street and find something that you can't read. And all of them turned out to be fantastic, to the point where like I knew immediately that Danielle would have to come back next year because you're very big into just Asian food in general.
I like to eat Asian food. I'm not into Chinese culture. I'm not going to make that claim. I don't know anything about it, but I don't know. It's tasty food.
Yeah, but the cuisine in that area is just insanely good. I did not expect that, and it definitely is something that gives PAX Unplugged an extra notch in the pro column for me. Just the food around there overall was so nice. And Eric, where were you staying? Were you at one of the connected hotels?
Yeah, I was at the connected Marriott.
Okay, so how did that work?
Marriott.
Was that like over that big empty skybridge kind of area?
Yeah, I had to go down the elevator from my room, like walk around the entire hotel, and then that led to the area with the skybridge, which then leads to the queue room. They were calling it the queue room, I believe.
Oh, is that what that was?
That big room with the lines,
Okay.
and those were for the 10 a.m. That was for the 10 a.m. Walk-ins.
Gotcha.
And I will say, for as many people as they have that line up, those go pretty smoothly.
Yeah. I only came in through that entrance once or twice with the exhibitor badge, and I know they had their own separate exhibitor badge line, which was really nice. But there were, I think, 3 total entrances. There were 2 entrances at the base of the convention center as well. And those, I mean, the metal detector line in one of those was extremely long. But I guess they did as well as they could to move it along. But again, it's just weird. You know, I'm not used to having a bunch of lines at a board game convention, but I know that lines for theaters and performances and stuff like that versus ticketed events that you get at like Gen Con is more of the PAX style.
Yeah, I didn't do any events. I didn't do any. They had some talks and stuff like that. I didn't do any of those.
Mm-hmm.
I just played games and demoed games basically. So so it was a wait on the security line, and then on Sunday, because I had my wife and kids, I waited on the walk-in line. But I did not do that. Friday I wasn't even there at 10 a.m. I got in about noon, and then Saturday I just went in early because and I actually wound up interviewing. We talked to the AEG folks together.
Yeah. So, talking about games, I think is the other obvious point. What were the things that you played that really stand out to you from coming to PAX Unplugged this year?
Well, since I just mentioned AEG, I got to talk about Tiny Towns.
Okay.
Did you get to try it?
I did not actually get to play it. Did you get to play it?
I did. I got to play it, and it was really, really good. It was such a neat little puzzle. You're building these little buildings, and they each have different scoring powers, and then to build, you have to make like a tetromino shape using cubes on this 4x4 grid. So your grid is like filling up, and you got cubes you're trying to hold off for different buildings. And then if you fill up your cube, your board, then once you fill it up and can't build anything and can't place anything, that's when your game ends.
Okay.
And it's one of those games where you could play with like a million people, a la Karuba or
Welcome to,
or like Number 9 or Welcome to.
Yeah.
So as long as you have sheets, you could play boards rather. It's not a roll and write. But yeah, it's place cubes and build little towns, and it's neat.
How long did it play for you?
I mean, 20 minutes.
Awesome.
I played it with two or three other people.
Mm-hmm.
What else? We played After the Empire together.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
I always like the idea of tower defense, and I like them on the phone. Mm-hmm. But then, like, the only board game one I've played is Castle Panic, and that one just felt a little. There wasn't enough there for it. I was just like, it just felt very rote. So this one adds like a whole worker placement, resource gathering. Like you have to build your defense while the bad guys start coming.
Yeah.
So you're not like really fully prepared for them.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see this game develop a little bit further, and I guess it's going to be kickstarting in the spring, maybe February, March, from what I've heard, and hopefully delivering by late next year. Maybe it'll be their PAX Unplugged release. But I am not one for tower defense, and this is the first time I've really enjoyed a tower defense style game. I think it was because this was not a cooperative game. You all have your own individual player board where you were building your castle and developing your troops and such like that, while at the same time on the central board you have your worker placement spaces, you have some resource collection, and then those invaders come out each round. You will obviously attack your thing, but I really liked the mechanic of they attack people that are over a certain wealth amount, which is also your victory points amount. And this is the thing that got me really excited during the game. Now, you went straight for a whole bunch of wealth, and that led to be your downfall eventually. And
yeah, I mean, since we were demoing the game, I made like an aggressive decision to see the whole game, which I figured it would come back to bite me, but it was like, you know what, let's see what happens, because I'm only going to get this one play of it until when it comes out next year. Mm-hmm. And then so I got to experience all the attacks.
That's cool. You felt some attacks, all right.
Oh yeah, and it's neat because a lot of games have catch up mechanisms in them, and it's like, and they kind of feel like, oh, this exists, so there's no runaway leader. But in this, it made so much thematic sense that, of course, these invading hordes are going to come after the people with the most wealth. Like, it was just so nicely tied in that it just made sense. So it's like Power Grid, where you kind of want to be last or near last, and then make your move right at the end, which you successfully did.
Yeah, I was talking with the designers afterwards, and so during the game, I was keeping my wealth basically 1 point under the 5s, because most of the cards came out as multiples of 5s, 15, 20, so-and-so is when they would attack. He told me afterwards, and this was something that I did not know about because it didn't come up during the game, is that while there might be 4 cards at 15, one of them is actually at a 14, and one of them's at a 16, just for that one particular person like me that was trying to game the system. And I apparently just got very lucky that none of the one-step down cards came out. But it's interesting, like a push your luck mechanism in there with the tower defense, with the central board kind of action selection worker placement was a really cool combination of stuff. So I'm very excited to see this game and get more plays of it in next year. Yeah, that was very good on you for getting that demo set up for us.
Yeah, what else did I play? There was one or two. I finally got to try the game Tack. The cheap-ass games that's based on the Patrick Rothfuss book series. And I thought that was a really, like, I've been thinking about it since, which is how I know I liked it. Like, oh, what if I would have tried to do it's a very abstract little, you're placing these wooden little pieces and trying to build a road across the board. And I keep thinking, like, what if I would have tried to do it this way? So now I'm going to pick it up. And I know my father's a chess player, so he likes those kind of abstract. So I'll play it with him over the holidays, and I'll report more after I play. I only demoed it the one, and I got destroyed, which is a good sign. I got destroyed by the demo at it.
Yeah.
Well, I would hope the demoer is better than somebody playing it for the first time.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point. Like, that's how you know there's like a lot of strategy and depth to the game. Because sometimes you could just pick up a game and like you immediately win, and you're like, well, that must be really lucky. This guy's been playing it all day, and he can't even beat someone playing it for the first time, But so that I felt that made it good.
Yeah, I've played 1 or 2 games of that. We have a group in Charlotte here that's pretty dedicated, connected to that in the kind of the beer world that have picked that up.
Yeah, and I know Will in our local game group is really excited about that. But I think they just came out with like a new, more portable version of Tack, didn't they? Like University or something?
Yeah, that's actually the one I picked up because it was the only one that was in stock. Yeah, I think it comes in a smaller box, more like a patchwork style box instead of like a Ticket to Ride box.
Okay.
So the pieces are a little smaller, the board is a little smaller. It was cheaper, so
yeah.
And I would have spent more for the big one, but I'm not sad to have a small. It's the same exact game, so and they're still wood pieces too. It's not like they made like chintzy plastic pieces this time, so it's going to look nice.
That might be worth looking into.
There's nothing terribly like fine detail that you're going to lose in scaling it down. I mean, it's just like the shape and color of a piece and a big checkerboard style board, right?
Yeah, unlike chess, there's only one. There's 2 kinds of pieces. Everyone has a whole bunch of one style of little square piece, and then everyone has one what looks like a pawn, which is called your cornerstone, your something stone, power stone. I don't know. It's this one extra powered piece that you have that can go on top of stacks, and then they can't be messed with.
Gotcha.
And keystone. I don't know. Whatever it was that. So yeah, there's no, you could make, unlike, because I've seen chessboards where they get really small, they get like really like abstract, and then I can't tell the difference between the bishop and the queen. So then, but this is not going to have that problem at all.
So kind of a simplicity in pieces of like an Onitama or something, where you just have the little guy and the big guy.
You got it. Another abstract game I like.
Danielle, do you have any questions about PAX Unplugged that we can answer as the person who did not attend? Do you have any questions before considering it next year?
I mean, I didn't go because I didn't want to go. I didn't go because it would cost $1,000 for me to go. No, I mean, it sounds really interesting. I guess the question that I had is how much of a draw do you think it was that it was a PAX convention? And how much of a draw do you think it was that this was a late season board game convention with a bunch of stuff?
Gotcha.
Because, I mean, my first thought was, okay, PAX Unplugged is going to get a lot of people who are familiar with the PAX name and who are in major eastern cities that are connected by public transport to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Was that the demographic you were seeing, or was it like people flying in from the West Coast because they were interested in this convention?
I think it was some from column A and some from column B, but I'll say definitely more from the first thing.
Yeah.
There were definitely a lot of people that were familiar with PAX and familiar with that brand, and then there were a lot of East Coast people from like Maine down to the Carolinas.
Yeah. I definitely felt, again, from, working at the booth and seeing that, I saw a lot of people come by that I could tell were regular PAX goers. People probably went to PAX East up in Boston a lot. Specifically, you see the pins, you see the shirts.
Yeah, that's a giveaway. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the pin culture and merch culture at PAX is very big. They've developed a very strong brand running that convention brand for probably, I guess, 15 years now, it feels at least. So some very large amount of years. And it's grown into this thing where they're running 4 different PAX conventions in the U.S. now and 1 in Australia, of all places. And it really is another opportunity for people in that kind of culture that don't have the opportunity to fly out to Seattle to go to PAX Prime to come in and get that PAX feeling. And I got to say, I really did love the feeling there. And I was really just impressed with how nice everybody was. It was a very friendly convention. Not to say that any other convention isn't friendly, but like if you go to a Gen Con or something, there's a lot of, I've got to go to the next booth. I've got to, this game's not good, blah, 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 I'm moving on kind of stuff. But I felt everybody there was really excited to learn about tabletop gaming and learn about new games and stop by and, pick out whatever caught their eye. It felt a very calm and friendly big convention.
I'll give you an anecdote. I had stopped by the R&R booth. You're familiar with that publisher. And they make like family style games, and then they also make Euro games.
Yeah.
And I went to the booth, and it was all family games. The kids tried out cave paintings.
Okay.
Like a Pictionary style little drawing game. And I was like, oh, where are your Euro games? And he just said, he's like the crowd here is just into the more gateway level, more entry level, and he's like, and we're selling well. And I heard a similar thing from the Cosmos booth. Mm-hmm. They're like, we're featuring Drop It and we're featuring Imhotep.
Yeah.
And they didn't even they weren't even featuring the Exit games, even though I think those are pretty gateway level, but they were just, and that seems to be what is what is selling at the convention. And I know last year, like some big heavier Euro game publishers were there, and they didn't sell well.
Yeah.
And I think now they've adjusted to the like last year the convention didn't know what it was because everyone was just showing up the first time, and now people are getting a better gauge on the crowd and it's great for me because it's the convention I could bring my kids to. So the fact that it's not like a heavy, more Euro convention I can't demo games with a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
But I can with all these entry level and family weight games.
I mean, that also makes sense with saying that it's people who are familiar with the PAX brand, because there is, and I'm willing to sort of make a generalization here, there is a growing crossover between video game players and board game players.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of folks who are really into video games being like, oh, these board games are cool things that I can spend my time on too. So if you're getting people who are making that transition and are familiar with PAX, they're going to trust the PAX brand. And then they're going to come to this board game convention. They're not going to want to play like, a 4.5-hour game of a heavy Euro.
Yeah.
They're going to want to play something that makes sense to them and that they can get their feet wet on. So makes sense to me that that's what it would be predominantly moving.
And I will add that you actually, this makes me think of the fact that I found a lot of the brands that seem to have very busy booths and very high interests were brands that had IPs.
Yeah.
And brands that had like video game friendly, like Level 99.
Yes.
They were demoing the new Exceed Street Fighter version. Now, Exceed is a system it's kind of plays like a 2-player like fighting game, a la Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, like a tabletop quick version of that, and the game takes like 10 to 15 minutes. So that's already perfect for the PAX wheelhouse. You get a hand of cards, you play a card, they play a card, back and forth, boom, boom, boom. Someone wins this little fight, and then slap on the Street Fighter IP on top of that for the nostalgia and the gaming cred, and like boom, like that's just gonna hit the mark, the perfect wheelhouse for the PAX goers.
Yeah, at the Gray Fox booth, we had Super Hot the card game, which is a game that, gets some note from board gamers in general, but I was really surprised. We put it right at the end cap of the merch shelving there, and probably every 5 to 10 minutes somebody walked by and was like, oh, super hot, I've played that video game, tell me about this thing. And that plus Harvest Dice, the Gray Fox Games Roll and Write, that thing went like hotcakes. People freaking love that. It's got that cute pig, obviously. But we had a bunch of copies of that, and it was one of the first things sold out at that booth. And it really comes down to the fact that you have a lot of people that are new to tabletop gaming. They're looking for a nice, interesting access point to learn more about the different kinds of games that are available. And like stuff like that, like you said, family weight and video game tie-ins are stuff that just were huge wins. But I was really surprised as well how much a game like City of Gears, that was, kind of that more heavier, bigger box kind of stuff, did sell pretty well too. So that's good.
Yep. And that also had the benefit of being new, and the fact that with that many people there, there's going to be, a range.
Yeah. Well, cool. Any other final thoughts on PAX Unplugged? I freaking loved it. I'm really excited how awesome that con was. I definitely feel like 3 days I left wanting to do more, but that could also just be because I spent half my time demoing.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't mind if they added Thursday to it. I wouldn't mind if they had the gaming area open after midnight, so I wouldn't have to scramble and find like a random hotel lobby to play in after midnight as a night owl. I wouldn't have minded if they also had a media morning on Saturday morning in addition to Friday morning. Mm-hmm. I don't understand, because they don't tell the publishers not to schedule meetings, and the publishers are going to want to schedule meetings when they can't sell things.
Yes.
Because if you're a publisher, they tell you could sell things between 10 and 6. You know what you're going to want to do is make money. Mm-hmm. So then they schedule you at 9 and 9:30, and then your media badge doesn't, and it's like, look,
you have to get snuck in.
Yeah, and it's like they schedule these meetings before 10 o'clock. They're like, either tell them or let me in. Because I'm planning my day before I get there.
Yeah.
And just trying to do everything, and it's hard enough where you don't have a lot of time because it's only Friday to Sunday, and my Sunday I block off because of the family day. So. Yeah.
Well, hey, for year 2 of a convention that's twice the size of Origins, I was pretty impressed with how smooth most of it went. So if we can get the lines and the middle sectors figured out.
Their brand is very good with the enforcers, and they have great signage, and they had little information stands. It's very easy and friendly, and they do it well. I know everyone complains about Origins every year, and rightfully so at some aspects of it. And I say this as someone that loves Origins, but I don't have a lot of those issues at PAX.
Cool. Well, I think it's safe for us to wrap it up here. Eric, do you want to say once again who you are, and where people can find your content?
Hey, sure. I am Eric Buscemi. I write the Cardboard Hoard blog, and I am one of the co-founders of Punchboard Media. I can be found on Twitter at Eric Buscemi.
All right. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to meet you at PAX, and hope to see you again next year, if not sooner.
And if you are looking for those links, I will put the links in the show notes to get to Eric's content, so that you don't need to figure out how to spell Buscemi.
And thank you for having me on. And it was a pleasure meeting half of Draft Mechanic in person. And I can't wait till next year when I get to meet both of you.
Absolutely. All right, Eric.
Look forward to it.
You have a great rest of your day.
Will do.
Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com.
So recently I was reading through a Facebook post that a friend of ours posted, and he was stating in a statement I'm not going to say whether I agree with or not, that the death knell of a brewery is when they had previously bottle dated their bottles and they stop. Bottle dating, if you are not aware and can't figure it out from the name, is when you stamp on a beer the date that it is either brewed on or best by on the bottle, and this helps the customer determine the freshness of the bottle. Now, the idea that you would stop stamping this may have two sort of reasons. It may be either because you don't want the customer to know when the beer was bottled because it's not selling quickly, or because you want to avoid buybacks. If you send it to a retailer and it passes that best by date, they may want you to buy back the beers because they're not going to sell it at a lower quality than it would be. Now, some retailers will sell it for a very long time. One that leaps to mind is a very major, entirely alcohol store.
And more. And they have more.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And more.
But some stores will actually ask a brewery to buy back beer. And if you're not dating it, they can't ask you to do that. Whether or not that particular sentiment is true, it really got me thinking about bottle dating. And I was reading through the 50 or something comments from all of the folks that work in breweries and run breweries that were weighing in on this. And I thought it was really interesting to sort of bring it up because I know a lot of people may not even look for a bottle date on their bottle when they're buying beer in the store. And even from the brewery, honestly. Mm-hmm. Now, a brewery, likely, if they take pride in their product, is not going to sell you product that they don't think is good. But especially if you're talking about, like, a major chain store, they may have had a couple of steps before it gets to the store. You know, it has to go to a distributor, and then the distributor sends it to the store. The store has to get shelf space before they can stock it. Maybe they're waiting for it to come into season, so they get it before it's the seasonal. You know, there are any number of reasons why beer that you're buying may not be the freshest it can be. But how do you check to make sure that it is? Well, like I said, there are two types of dates that you're going to find on a bottle. The first is brewed on, or born on, or, you know, entered world, or whatever they call it.
Handcrafted.
A born on date just tells you when the beer was made. And you need to take that date and turn it into an evaluation of how fresh it is. So maybe something like an IPA, if that date's more than about 6 months ago, you probably don't want to buy it. I mean, it might still be good. Or if it's something like a 120 minute, which isn't really an IPA, it's really like a barley wine, you might be fine. But if you're getting, you know, a standard IPA and that date is more than 6 months ago, you might want to at least think about whether you want to buy that beer. Something like a stout or a barley wine, like I said, or a sour, that date could be much farther out. And you can make that decision based on the style of beer that you're buying and what that date says. A best buy date is just like any other food that has a best buy date. You know, it is the producer's estimation of when the quality of that product is going to start to slip. What it doesn't tell you is how far out that date is from when they brewed it. Mm-hmm. So maybe I say that I don't want to buy an IPA that's more than 6 months old. That doesn't mean that the date isn't 9 months from when it was brewed. You really have no way of checking that. They're not going to put both dates on it, most likely. I mean, some might, but more than likely you're only going to find a brewed on or a best buy. So if you're looking at those things, I don't know, I prefer a brewed on date. That way I can make the decision as to whether or not I want to buy the beer myself. But if you are looking at a best buy date and that is close, it is probably on sort of the outside end of when the beer is probably its freshest. So you might want to consider whether you're going to buy that beer. The other thing that these dates are useful for, even with beers that don't necessarily go bad, and you can't see the air quotes, but Jake can, that's why he's laughing.
I see them. They're there.
Like I said, imperial stouts or barley wines, those beers are good for a lot longer, but you might not necessarily know what year they're brewed from. I mean, they're good for so long that it's possible that the imperial stout you're seeing on a shelf now might be from last year. Mm-hmm. And if you know anything about what was put into a specific year's brew, maybe they changed the malts or the hops, maybe there was a different adjunct added, you might want to know when it was brewed on so that you know what to expect when you're buying it. If you don't like a specific adjunct and they added it 1 year, you want to know if it is in there. Also, some adjuncts will get less potent over time, so the beer itself isn't necessarily going to go bad, but maybe if you keep your bottle of CBS for 4 years, a lot of that maple is going to fall out of it. Or if you get a spicy beer and you keep it for a longer time, it's not going to be as spicy, which may be good, it may be not as good for you. Mm-hmm. But you want to know how old that beer is so that you can make that decision. Auto date stampers are the sort of high-tech way of doing this. When you have a canning line or a bottling line, you can buy a stamper that will put on the bottom, and I mean, it's what you see on a lot of food products where it says like expires or best buy or born on the bottom of a lot of cans, you'll see that. But they are an expensive piece of equipment to add to your line, and they're not vital. I mean, it is important to date your product because that's how your customer knows it's fresh, but you can sell beer without a born on or a best buy date. It's not regulated in the same way that any other food is, because theoretically if you drink an IPA that isn't fresh, you won't get sick. If it is infected, you probably also won't get sick, but it is more likely. But just drinking an old beer doesn't make you sick. I guess that's why it's not regulated the same way. But you can run a brewery without owning a date stamper. But a lot of what the folks that were sort of commenting on this, who all have started breweries, I mean, I know for a fact that the one who is the main commenter in this is a local brewery employee that has been there for a long, long, long time and has had experience with this. Even if you don't have that piece of machinery, you can put stickers on it, just like a regular sticker that says, just the date it was born on. Or you can, they were talking about having to hand number special edition bottles. The one I'm particularly thinking of is Yulebach from Old Mac.
Yeah.
And they were talking about having to hand number bottles of Yulebach for a couple of years. And it stinks, but the customer at least has confidence in that product because you know when it is. One of the things I didn't think about is when you move from using a mobile canning line, a lot of smaller breweries will use a mobile canning line if they're canning their beer, which is essentially a person that comes around with a canning line in a truck, sets up in your brewery, cans your product, then moves on to another brewery. If you have a mobile canning line, a lot of times they will have a date stamper, and when you purchase a line for yourself, if that line doesn't have a stamper, you may actually take a step back in your product dating, because now you're running your own line, which is great. You have complete control of your process and you don't have to wait for this other person to come in and do your canning for you. But now you have to find a way, if you haven't purchased a date stamper, to date those bottles. And that's where going back to, stickers or hand numbering might be what you end up having to do. The other thing that was sort of interesting was that there is a variety of different ways that beer can be labeled for freshness, and some of them are more useful than others. There's obviously your standard date, born on 1/23/2018 was last January. Worst comes to, the worst possible situation is you have the date or month may be flipped. Was this produced on January 9th or September 1st? And looking at where the beer was produced, you should be able to figure that out based on what the local date setup normally is. Do you put the month or the day first? There are two other ways that were predominantly talked about that are ways of numbering beers. One is by batch number, which is just you say, oh, this is batch 5. And a lot of times if breweries do that, they'll list when they brewed their batches on their website. If they don't, you have to go back and find a place that lists when the batches came out, which is something you probably aren't going to do in the grocery store. And you probably don't have cell phone service in the store if your store is anything like ours. So you have to sort of guesstimate. It's not particularly useful. The thing that was less useful than that, less useful than no information to me, was something called Julian dating. And the way this is done, there were two different ways that I found that are considered reasonable. One is to put the first 2 digits to represent the year, or possibly even just the first digit to represent the year, but you don't know which. And then the next 3 digits are the day within the year. So the 137th day of either 2003 or 2013 would be represented by 3/127, and then some other numbers that don't mean anything.
Yeah.
They are brewery numbers that are used for some other additional controls, but you don't necessarily know when the numbers that don't mean anything in the date start.
I despise Julian dating. We have that come up pretty frequently at the restaurant.
You also can put the date first, so 127, and then represent the year with 1 or 2 numbers, and then have some other numbers that mean nothing. Or you can put the date first, and then a letter that represents the month, a letter that represents the year, and then some numbers that don't mean anything. So maybe it says 127T, and then some other numbers.
Yeah.
And unless you know what T means to that brewery, you don't know what year it was made in. This is stupid. This is not helpful. This is less helpful than not putting a number and just putting a batch, in my opinion. Because
it's false hope.
It's intentionally obfuscating something that should be fairly simple. And I saw this explained as it was originally added as a date not for customer freshness, but for the brewery so they can track how long it was between batches of the same beer. So they can pull down this batch. Oh, this batch says 117. Next batch says 127. It was 10 days between these beers. That's great. But these are going out into the world and people are looking at them and using them for freshness, and you're not providing another freshness indicator, so you should provide a freshness indicator. You've provided this one, and it's stupid.
I despise Julian dating so much.
I think it's ludicrous the amount of variability that can occur in something as simple as a date. But at least it's better, I think, than nothing.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yeah.
I mean, I know I said that batch dating is better than Julian dating, and batch dating is essentially no information. But at least when you're putting Julian dates on a beer, you've shown at least that you understand that freshness is important. Whereas if you don't date it at all, then you're not really giving the customer any information to know that your beer is fresh. If you have a seasonal beer and it's out of season, it's a little bit older. If you have a seasonal beer and it's in season, one would hope that it's from this year, but you never actually know. But with year-round beers, it's really just a crapshoot, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So look at bottle dates on your beer. Mm-hmm. And if you don't find them, maybe don't buy the beer.
I've always really appreciated breweries that clearly label their dates. Burial, for example, I like to bring them up every 5 minutes. They put out so many IPA one-offs in the last few years that I just kind of lose track of which one is which. And the fact that they date every single one of their batches has made it really helpful for me to remember, okay, so this is the one that came out 3-4 releases ago. This is the fresh one. I want to make sure I drink that older one first. That kind of stuff is super helpful. Another place that I've seen come really handy was Epic Brewing with their Big Bad Baptists. They actually do the batch number series like that, which is super awesome because they change Baptist frequently enough that by searching their website and just saying, I have batch 3, I need to see what the particular things in that one were, I was able to pull up 3-year-old information about this bottle that we found in the back of the closet last year.
Yeah, and Baptist is an imperial stout. Mm-hmm. It's a big beer. And it's going to last for longer. If you have a year-old Baptist, it's not going to be as pungent as fresh Baptist would be, but it's not going to be as hurt by being old as something like an IPA or a pale ale would be. I don't think Epic is doing batch numbers on their pale ales. I assume they're probably dating those cans.
Probably. Yeah, well, brewers out there, if you date your beers, thank you. If you don't date your beers,
Indeed.
Glaring sound. The sound of glaring. All right, well, it is time for us to move on to the most complex final round that I've done in a while, and kind of accidentally. So I was involved in a Twitter conversation about how to define a Euro game, and this led me to
where this came from?
That is where this came from, and it led me to designing basically a little bit of a chart. I have an axis that is from random to deterministic, and an axis that is solitaire to interactive. And I asked the Slack, and I quote, I created a graph with 2 axes, solitaire to interactive and deterministic to random. Is your favorite game solitaire or interactive? Random or deterministic? Show your work. And oh boy, did they show their work.
They did very good. They came through for you.
I fully expected our Slack channel participants, which we don't really have a better name for. I'm not going to call them slackers because there was definitely not a lot of slacking going on in this particular one, to just say Terraforming Mars is blank comma blank. But we had 4 people that actually plotted out 5 to 20 games each on this particular graph. And we'll put this stuff in the show notes as well. We can copy those graphs over and have it so everybody can take a look at it. But it's a really interesting look at how we define games. And I wanted to just kind of go through this and talk about it.
Speaking of which, Terraforming Mars was, I believe, fairly solo, but a little bit random.
Yeah, I would give it like a negative or a 3 towards solo and maybe a 1 or a 2 towards random because you have so many cards.
3 towards solo, 2 towards random.
Nailed it. So for purposes of this discussion, everything has a maximum of 4 points towards its particular end. So a game that is a 4 deterministic would be a game that has 0 randomness and all knowledge all of the time, while a game that is a 4 towards randomness would be obviously a game that is entirely reliant on rolling dice or drawing shuffled cards, something like that. While the solitaire to interactive line, a solitaire game would be you're just playing it by yourself and it doesn't matter what any of the other players are doing. Highly interactive would be a particular game that is entirely about interacting with other players. Like a game like Diplomacy springs to mind as a 4 for interactive to me. So we'll start off with D. Shannon Barry, who is the first to show his work on this. Says, I love graphs, though I wonder about this making for good radio. I'm going to try my best. You asked for it. Was surprised by some results, like Hogwarts Battle, despite being co-op, leans solo for me because each turn you're primarily concerned with your own cards and doing your thing, even though it's to help the team. And he placed that at 2 points towards solitaire and 2 points towards random. I guess that makes sense. You're shuffling and drawing cards, but you've got control of it as you're building your deck. He also said, even though every turn encrypted is literally interacting with other players, the crux of the game lies in you solving the puzzle on your own. And he had that at a 4 towards deterministic, which makes perfect sense. It's pure deduction. And a 1 towards interactive. I actually would have put this closer towards interactive. I would have put it maybe as a 3 or so for myself, while still keeping it high deterministic. That kind of hard deduction where you're getting all of the information from other players seems to me that would fall into that particular side of the scale.
Not only that, but where you put your sort of decoy information with those not here cubes, when you're placing out cubes that say the monster can't be in a specific location because you've guessed an incorrect location yourself. Those really can affect what other players think. If you place them in a spot that sort of hints that you have one specific clue, but it's actually something very different than what you have, then you can throw off everybody else's deduction. So I feel like that's definitely interactive.
I really want to play Cryptid again.
Well, we're doing this now?
I really like that game. We can't play it. Well, we can play it 2 players. There is a 2-player variant now.
But we're doing this now.
Moving on. Tell us about the next one.
Well, Ryan Quick not only gave us the graph that you asked for, but he added a variable, increasing the size of his data point based on how much he liked the game. So he says some games like Captain Sonar, escape room games, etc. are obviously fully interactive and probably skew the overall results. But I'd agree that the co-ops tend to trend solo even for the ones that aren't. So even co-ops he has that aren't technically solo games, he's saying that they are trending. The ones that he likes are trending solo.
Yeah.
Of course, that could just indicate I am a horrible alpha gamer. That doesn't reflect whether you have the ability to keep your mouth shut when it's not your turn.
Yeah, so he's got the, Arkham Horror trading card game is mostly towards solo and also high up on random. I feel like we're going to see that in a lot of those kind of cooperative card games. You're shuffling cards, you're working through them, and what comes up is random, and you're mainly going to be dealing with your own situation. I'm wondering, what would it take to, what is a game that is highly interactive and highly interactive co-op? How would you do that particular kind of game? Is that social deduction, maybe?
Well, I mean, he's got Captain Sonar as super interactive and co-op.
Okay, so yeah, I think that is a good idea.
Definitely working together in that.
Yeah, and that one is kind of halfway deterministic, halfway random on his. He's actually got that flat on that particular axis.
Yep.
I wonder how that would. Yeah. Okay, I can see how that places there.
He's also got Time Stories, which I agree is also very interactive.
But it does have the randomness of the dice, which maybe I'd move it a little closer to deterministic. But you do have the dice kind of affecting it that way.
Well, you can also go to different places in different orders, and that can affect the way the game plays. So I think I like where he has it, but it is definitely an interactive co-op.
Up next, we have Dennis, who says, I tend to prefer some randomness in most of my games. I think it makes them more fun and accessible, less dry. I also really like games with high interaction, Table Talk, Accusations like that in Citadels, The Resistance, and Dead of Winter. I think it's interesting both what others' favorite games are and how they think of those games compared to me in regards to this chart.
I also think it's kind of interesting what people picked as their favorite games because we had no duplicates in this list. So everybody's got different favorite games.
That is really surprising that 4 people who are all, participating in this thing, and everybody put 5 to 20 games on here, and there's not a single game overlapped on all of this. I mean, obviously, if we did our charts, we'd probably have a few things overlap.
There's also an interesting point that when you look at these charts, nobody's particular chart skews entirely to one quadrant of the graph. So you'd think that if somebody liked a lot of similar types of games, all their points would be in one area of the graph. But everybody that submitted a chart has stuff all across all 4 quadrants.
I guess that's kind of the fun thing about board games in general. Patrick Hillier, as is tradition, has the final word here. His quick thoughts: he had a hard time defining heavily deterministic games. They all have some randomizer. That's interesting as well, because I feel like I have a hard time thinking of super deterministic games, and I wonder if a deterministic game would be very interesting in this day and age.
I mean, something like Solitaire would have to be super deterministic, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Because the cards only come out in the order that they're shuffled.
Mm-hmm. And I think that Cryptid is a good game for something that is highly deterministic there, because there is no randomness to that. You just
But we just said that there was definitely some interactiveness, which can change that. So I took all of the games that were submitted on the graphs that we got, and I put them into Excel, and I made a scatter plot.
You do love a good spreadsheet and graph.
I do love a good spreadsheet. So it looks like no matter what the level of interactivity is, our group liked our games to skew just a little bit random. They were around 1 on the randomness side of the random to deterministic scale.
Yeah.
Now, as the games become more interactive, it got a little bit less likely that we wanted those games to be random.
Yeah.
So the highly interactive games were closer to like a 3/4 on random, whereas the solo games, the preference was towards maybe like 1 1/4. But we're talking about a 0.5 change across the whole line of best fit.
Yeah.
So really, you're looking at something where you want a little bit of randomness so that you can replay a game probably, but not so much that it's just going to become a mess.
Yeah. I guess that kind of makes sense, because as you get more and more as a game that is interactive, where you're combating other players, you want to have control over your destiny there. Interesting. Well, thanks to those of you who participated and gave us a little bit of data here to play with. It came out to be a more interesting scenario than I thought it would be. And I would love, maybe at some point in 2019, I'll just put up an open Google form or something where people can enter their 10 favorite games and how they judge them on this particular scale. I'd like to see that with a lot more data, just to see how it shakes out. I'm sure there's a spreadsheet out there that can do that for us.
I mean, yes, there is. What I'd be interested to see is the difference in people's ratings of the same games, because we didn't have any overlap on these. I'd be curious to see if you had people rating the same games on these 2 scales. Do they rate them the same, or are we really just throwing darts at a dartboard with what we're saying these games are?
Well, maybe time will tell. And maybe the next final round you can participate in. Dear listener, you can come visit our Slack channel, draftmechanic.net/Slack, if you want to join in there, and throw your name and or thoughts into the final round. I actually just put up next episode's final round. We are talking about our gaming resolutions for 2019 and also reviewing how we did at our 2018 gaming resolutions. Unsurprisingly, everybody bought more games than they thought they would. And I guess that's pretty much going to bring us to the end of the show. You can go on the internet, draftmechanic.net, hit us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at draftmechanic as well. Draftmechanic@gmail.com if you choose to send us an email. That's also an option.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470 if you would like to let us know something about the episode that you have just listened to. If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, our next meetup is going to be on December 18th at Salud Cerveceria in the Noda neighborhood.
Cool. Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. Visit grayfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest. Gray Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. Danielle, I believe you have one final thing to say. I'm not even going to forget about it this time.
As always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that I'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
Cool. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Draft Mechanic episode 90 was recorded on Sunday, December 9th, 2018 in front of a live and very mobile Studio Cat.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hey out there in podcast land, this is Brian and I just wanted to invite you to check out my tabletop game review and preview video channel, Cloak and Meeple. There, I check out a lot of Kickstarter games, as well as sneak in some fresh reviews of published games. Come and check out all of the bad acting in my attempts to be entertaining in my intros. Stay for a game overview and hear my thoughts of the game at the very end. You can find Cloak and Meeple on YouTube at youtube.com/cloakandmeeple.
Punchboard Media,
where we all bring something to the table.
Pull up a chair
At punchboardmedia.com.